Welcome to everyone. So happy to see a good turnout. I am Betty Sim Conroy. I'm president of the Key Biscayne Neighbors Association. And our association, the Neighbors Association, believes that good government is not possible without informed, engaged citizens. So we really, truly thank you all for coming and being interested in the coming election. Of course, we're very excited to have our 6 candidates in front of us up here, and they are running for the 3 open seats in the November 5th election. And we'll be hearing from them in just a few minutes. I want to introduce our Key Biscayne board, our Key Biscayne Neighbors Association board. I'm the president. Josie Valdez-Hurtado. Susanna Braun is right up here. She's our secretary. Servander Parapar, there he is. He's our treasurer. So that is the Key Biscayne Neighbors Association board. We're very fortunate tonight to have Joshua Nix, and he will be our timekeeper. He's experienced. He was at the last forum and did a great job. So. And he's doing it strictly as a volunteer, so he's starting early. We are, due to popular demand, having questions near the end of after the questions that we have planned, questions from the public, from you all. And what we ask, Susanna and Josie are passing out, they have index cards. And if you could write the question down, you may not even know the question now, but as the meeting goes on, you may think of something, and you can put your name and write your question down. So that will be fun. That will be fun. And now it is my pleasure to introduce a former mayor of Key Biscayne, and she is going to be our moderator. She was the first woman mayor. She served from 2014 until 2018. So our moderator for tonight will be Myra Lindsay.
Good evening, everyone. Betty, thank you very much. Key Biscayne Neighbors Association, thank you for inviting me to moderate. We will be starting shortly. We want to get as many questions in, and these questions were presented to me by the Key Biscayne Neighbors Association. We will have a group of 2-minute questions where everyone gets 2 minutes to answer questions, and then another set of questions that are shorter, and you will each get 1 minute. Now, we will start alphabetically from Michael Bracken, and then we will stagger the beginning so that everyone gets to start for a question, and it's somewhat scientific. So we want to make sure that everyone gets a chance and that they answer questions at different junctures and not after hearing everyone's questions, answers already. So let's start, and let's put 2 minutes on the clock, please. Starting with Michael Bracken and coming down for this question in particular. It is a topic is transparency and trust in government, and the question is, would you support adding an ethics code section to our village charter and the use of an inspector general to review compliance? And a sub-question that you may want to address is, what areas of conduct need addressing, guidance, and clarification for council members and employees?
I don't really think we need any change in our current charter. I'm pretty comfortable with the transparency of the government. I think they're doing a good job. I don't really see any necessity to add anything to it. Thank you.
Mr. Kaplan?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Frank Kaplan, hello. I thought I was coming to the 2040 Vision Workshop, but I'm here. That's good. No. I think one example, the state of Florida's Constitution is an example of trying to park too much in a document that doesn't stand for the purpose for which much of what winds up in the Constitution tends to try to address. Things that are addressed in statute and in regulations. Not everything belongs in a constitutional document, in a charter. The ethics laws in Florida are rather extensive. Every public official is bound by them, and there's an entire infrastructure in Florida law that assesses compliance and has enforcement supervisory functions. So the answer is no.
Mr. Collins?
This came up recently, as a matter of fact. I used to work for the county, as many of you know. Out of the county evolved, there was a lot of issues after home rule, and we wound up with 13 commissioners. And so the county board of commissioners invented the office of ethics. Still exists. It's basically it's good for the politicians because if you do make an accusation or you think something's going on, or maybe a guy's lobbying from the Diaz and Diane, you can call the ethics guy and you can get a ruling. And the other side of the coin, if you feel that you're being charged unjustly, you can ask for an opinion. And the ethics laws that came out of the COE are universal to every municipality in Dade County. So there is an overriding ethics code of ethics that's the bare minimum. So should we have one? I don't think it needs to be a constitutional amendment. I think we could probably set something up on the, without having to get a charter amendment. But I don't see any downside in it.
Agreed.
Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate your coming and listening to all of us. Each one up here is qualified, and hopefully this will help you determine which person you want on the dais to represent you for the future of Key Biscayne. As far as transparency of government, I think the village is doing a pretty good job. They want to make the data available. They're using multi-channel communications. The last meeting 2 nights ago, there was a resolution to increase the communication and the channels of communication to the community. So the council is working on it, and they always see there's a nice need to get it to the population and the public. As far as an inspector general, I don't think the village needs an inspector general. Historically, over 25 years, I can't think of any 2 instances where something like that would have been needed. And we have always been fortunate to have good leaders on the dais in our council. As the other candidates have said, we're covered by other laws, state and county.
Mr. Lopez Jenkins?
Nick Lopez Jenkins. It's funny because as I was leaving the house today, I was watching the city of Miami. They had just adopted an inspector general there. So thankfully, we don't have the same issues in government that the city of Miami does. Having a limited amount of interaction with them, with the Virginia Key Advisory Board, yeah, there's a large level of hiccups over on that side of the bridge. That being said, if there are any gaps in the state or in the county ethics codes that we think we need to fill, like I said, I wouldn't have an issue with it being added. In addition to that, I think an inspector general would be something that we could address at a point that something egregious would happen. So, thank you.
Ms. Stoner?
Generally, I would be against an amendment to the charter. I think our charter has stood us in good stead since our inception. I believe we've made some minor changes along the way. We do have laws that already govern us, and we do have a resolution that was adopted by the council several years ago that requires all of us to take an oath of loyalty and honest dealing, and I think that pretty much covers it. I don't personally know of a problem with violations that we need to address, so this is kind of fixing a problem that doesn't quite exist that I know of. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for the next question, starting with Mr. Kaplan. The topic is prioritizing the budget process, and it is a follow-up from the last forum that you all participated in. The question is, what does the budget process achieve, and what are its weaknesses? And why is the analysis of non-discretionary line items important?
Okay, let's try this. And this is a suitable conversation for us to have eye to eye, because one of the things I recall doing constructively with you in 2010 was visiting with our then manager, Chip Iglesias, you'll remember this, and pointing out that the budget presentation, the budget process is very sound and sensible and extremely rational, and I'll get to that in just a minute. The budget presentation, getting to weakness right away, at that point in time was nearly imponderable unless you were schooled in an expert fashion in reading a very cryptic and convoluted presentation. things were not intuitive. Allocations of expense that were shared among the various departments sensibly, necessarily, weren't capable of being understood unless you took a self-tutorial that involved a very deep dive. So it got improved. And I think over the course of the years since then, more or less every so often, not annually, but frequently, there's further improvement in the presentation. So right now, in my opinion, it's well organized, it's logical, and it's intuitive, and it's easier by a whole lot to comprehend, to understand, and to criticize, which gets to the third point. The line item, particularly in the discretionary categories of expense, is where opportunities for savings and reflection on priorities most practically occurs. It's that process of looking where savings can be found and reassessing every year whether this is actually a priority that has to happen now, or can it wait, etc. The building of it is all based on strategic planning, which happens frequently and is revisited all the time. That, to me, is an elegant and essential way to proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
That was a master class. How long you been at it? Okay, I've read a bunch of budgets in my life. I find this one very difficult. He was talking about presentations. I still think it's cryptic. I helped found Palmetto Bay, so I use them as a reference. I go down there and look at their budget. It's pretty clear. It's pretty simple. So what we're reduced to here is we get sound bites. You know, we got the millage rate. It seems to always revolve around the superlative with a millage rate. So just to show you how it can be manipulated, so Palmetto Bay has what's our millage rate now?
2.9.
2.9. Palmetto Bay's is 2.35. And then Pinecrest, which is a high service city where we lived for a long time, it's 2.35. Bell Harbor is 0.9 something, 0.98. So if we just take those sound bites, which is what most of us hear, we're told that everything's going well. You don't really need to look behind the curtain. I disagree. I think I'd like to see a clearer budget process. Anyway, I'm not an accountant, but I can offer suggestions on and the other thing, I know the bottom line, you get it like a week before it's due. It's like we don't see, I know at the county we got it 2 months early. Here you get it a couple of weeks early. So I'd like to see that come out a lot earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Freed?
With respect to the millage rate, our millage rate is one of the lowest in the county. If you look at the millage of the municipalities that Charles mentioned, they don't have a fire service in their millage. They're paying Dade County for that fire service, and it puts their total millage over 4. We are very much benefiting from the foresight of our ancestors. With respect to the budget, I've read the budget several times. For me, it took 2 or 3 times to get through it and try to understand it. I saw a lot of spending that I questioned when I was listening to the budget hearing. The first budget hearing, I did it on video, and it took about 4 settings to finally get through it. It's difficult. And I went to the final budget hearing, and one of the discussions was, why aren't we getting our numbers and preliminary items earlier? Instead of, why can't we start doing this much earlier in the year, so when it comes time to crunch, discuss, do the policies and the strategic planning, the council will be much better prepared to make those decisions to benefit all of us.
I'm going to piggyback on what Charles and Mark said. I think the timing of when budget is received is really the key point here. Yes, sir, I think the budget's become clearer over the past couple of years, but the idea that you don't have time to digest and really have a discussion about particular items, it's a lot of pressure to be able to figure out if something is actually necessary when the timeline is very short. So I think the best way to address this is to receive the budget earlier, have additional input from the community as far as items are concerned, and give the council plenty of time to digest the budget and know where we can actually cut and try to create a consensus on those items as far as not creating contentious times that we have going back and forth on small items that could have been taken out of the budget a long time ago.
Ms. Stoner?
It's my understanding that a preliminary budget was issued and there was a workshop held in June, and that the final budget came out, yes, just a few weeks before it was adopted, but that it was substantially the same as what had been presented in June. So we always could stand to improve our procedures. Yes, it would be great to get the budget out a little bit earlier, but there was plenty of time to look at the budget, to question, to approach whomever, and for discussion. And one of the things I'm finding through campaigning is a lot of people are saying they didn't know, including me, a lot of things I didn't know. But if you go to the village website, they give the dates for the workshop, all of the documents are online. It takes work to become an informed resident. And as I say, I wasn't the most informed resident, but as I've wanted to learn more, I just keep going to the website. I look for something. Sometimes it's easier than others to find, but I ultimately find what I'm looking for, including the budget. Budgets can always be improved. I would like the budget in the future to incorporate the 5-year plan, strategic plan, so we could see where we are within the plan, what kind of progress we're making. And I also think it would be helpful if, for some of the projects that we undertake, to have estimated completion dates, so we had some idea of when the money was going to be spent. Thank you.
Okay.
Michael has an answer.
Sorry, Michael.
It's
Oh,
okay.
you might be done.
I actually wanted to concur with Nancy. As far as the process is concerned, I believe the process is working quite fine. I do have some concerns about some of the data points where we're maybe focusing on things I would like us to see is focus a little bit more on maintenance, okay, on the maintenance line items. Okay, as we all pointed out, the vast majority of the budget is actually payroll or organized things. So really, there's only $5 million that we really can play with on the budget out of the $44 million that the budget is currently at. So I would like to see us focus a little bit on the maintenance side of that equation and put more emphasis on that point. Thank you.
30-second follow-up question is, for the last 2 years, proposed budgets have been released days before the first budget hearing. Do you think this is acceptable, and what would you do to change this? Starting with Charles Collin.
Certain deadlines that we put we build into the budgeting process. Budgets will be due. And you know it takes a while because it goes, if we're doing it right, we start at the ground. You go talk to a park attendant. What do you need next year? What do you need over here in maintenance? So it should be an ongoing process, and if we set waypoints in that process, we should have a budget on time. Thank you.
Mark Freed.
It's interesting, this question seems to contradict what others on the panel just said about the budget. But I look at it, this is something that the council gets to set. The council is the ultimate ruling body of the village, and the council directs the manager, get our budget on this date. And we have it at the date we really want it. One thing I looked at on the budget is, and it's in the budget, it says the cost drivers, professional and contractual services. It went up 9.6%, and it's almost 16% of our entire budget, $15 million.
Mr. Lopez Jenkins.
To Mark's point, I mean, we have to, as a council, have to drive what those staff accomplishes. I mean, it can't be the other way around. And so if, I think that probably one of the first things that the new council can do is put in different parameters about timelines as far as when to submit budgets. I'm glad there are workshops, but like I said, a workshop is a proposal of a proposed budget. It's not the actual budget that's being submitted to the council. So.
Ms. Stoner.
I have no problem with an earlier presentation of the final budget. It allows time for everyone to digest and ask further questions. I also would like to add to my prior answer that I agree with what Ed London had brought up during one of the budget hearings, and that is that we need a budget that encompasses a 12-month time period. We keep getting a budget that brings us to date. It gives us, I think, maybe 9 months when we start to consider it. And I think it would be important to be able to consider all 12 months in preparing a budget to go forward.
Mr. Brackett?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I also agree with Nancy, we need to have a 12-month budget. You can't look at this in a 9-month cycle, it needs to be 12 months. Thanks.
Mr. Kaplan?
Two things. One, there is a percentage completion component when the budget comes out and when it evolves through first and second reading. So you can, takes a little bit of interpolation, but you can track how we've been doing year to date and whether we're on target to land where we thought we would at the beginning of the previous year. Second is, council always drives the earliest possible delivery date. There's an alignment with what's actually achievable. We don't have hundreds of people working on this, and it is a complicated process. Some of the revenues have to be settled before you can have a meaningful projection on the revenue side, and it takes time. So they do the best they can, I think. This year was a little late. We were not that happy with the timing this year.
Thank you. Our next topic is responsive government. A significant complaint about Key Biscayne government is non-responsiveness to the resident. Would you be willing to have office hours in the village hall? What turnaround time is for responses do you deem appropriate for emails, phone calls, and text? And what measures or actions would you propose to improve lines of communication? Let's start with Mr. Freed.
With respect to responsive government, I looked at this question, I thought, well, there's a macro and there's a micro. With respect to macro, what is this building that we're sitting in, how is it delivering its services to the residents? Whether it's through the internet, whether it's going to the building and zoning department, police, fire, how is that responsiveness? As far as micro, it's the individual. It's the individual homeowner who walks outside and sees there's a problem here on the village, and then make a phone call to code enforcement. I want to say what's going on. An example, the house next to ours was under construction for 4 years. For 2 years, there were plywood windows and doors on the property. It had not been mowed at 6 weeks, 7 weeks at a time. And I had to inform the then manager that the law provides that they can mow the lawn and put a lien on the house. So at that point, the responsiveness was terrible. It was, and I probably made 10 calls to Dario. When I'd call, he'd say, "Yes, Mr. Freed, what do you need?" The house again. So it's both individually and the entire village, and how do we improve it? It starts with the council setting the example of what good government is, flowing down through the manager, through the ranks.
Mr. Lopez Jenkins?
As far as setting office hours, yes, I would be in favor of that. I think it's very important. We have one advantage here in the village of Key Biscayne that a lot of other people, maybe in different communities, don't have, is that we know exactly where everybody is. And I would say this as a current citizen and as a citizen, whenever I've had an issue with the village that I don't seem to be responding as far as a phone call or an email, I just come here in person. And trust me, once people start showing up in person, asking for answers, they'll start responding to telephone calls and emails, okay? Because that's the only way that you actually can get through this. So yes, I think all of the council should have office hours. It should be obviously limited. This is a free job, as we all know. So, but I would be more than willing to set that up, because I think that personal interaction is something that we could still keep in a small village like this. It's lost in a lot of other areas. People, I was speaking to somebody just today and saying that, if you went across the bridge to the city of Miami and you showed a picture of the village of the city manager, nobody would know who he is. And everybody basically knows who he is here. So that being said, in touch, in person, I think is a way to get things done, and it'll get people motivated. And once again, I think the council can set that example by opening themselves up to actual office hours and having conversations with our fellow citizens.
Ms. Stoner?
I think having office hours sounds great, but I don't think it's for the council people. I don't think it's a practical or a fair request. This job, even though it's unpaid, involves an enormous amount of time. Yeah, I don't think people realize the time that goes into educating yourself, doing the research, getting the details, going to speak to everybody on staff, speaking to people in in the grocery store and at the farmer's market and at the tailor. And another thing is that you do see everybody everywhere. You can approach or email council members at any time. I had a problem once with something that I saw posted on the internet that I was appalled. I sent an email to all the council members, chief of police, chief of fire, and the next day I was bombarded with a response, bombarded, because people, and not everyone agreed with my objection, but I did get a response from everyone. I do agree that coming in, if necessary, would help. I also have been still sitting as a magistrate for 13 years. So while the house next door to Mark's might have fallen through the cracks, I know that Dario and his department goes around and gives citations for offenders, and that they do a pretty good job of enforcing the code. So as far as that's concerned, I'm going to stick up for Dario.
Mr. Bracken?
I look at the council as a board of directors. I don't see it's our day-to-day job to be telling the manager what to do. I think we're supposed to set strategic direction and plan. And if the manager is not holding his people accountable and the services are not being supported as they should be, then we should step in and do something about it. But it's not our job to do this day to day. As far as being available, I think everyone's available. I mean, I know if I pick up the phone and call Nancy, she'd be available. If I pick up the call with Frank, anyone would be available. We live in a small town. I think people can walk up to you and talk to you if they need to talk to you. If they need your email, they just email you. I don't think there's a necessity to have, hours. Sounds almost like college. Thanks.
Mr. Kaplan?
I think a little perspective occurs to me, coupled with a kind of like a plea. The first perspective is our government. That means all of us. And in the this is the Platonic ideal of the Commonwealth, in which we are reciprocally responsible, working together in a cooperative and collaborative way to create good government. The plea is for a little empathy and understanding. It's part of the job to be accessible and responsive, and insofar as I know, certainly speaking for me, I put that at the top of the list of things that I'm supposed to do every single day. If there's a lack of responsiveness on my part, I'm not aware of it, and just about everybody I know has my cell phone and 3 emails and knows where I live, and they knock on the door too. And I go to Winn-Dixie, by the way, a lot, because I do all the cooking. So I'm not suffering from an absence of human contact. But a little understanding and empathy is warranted here. It is a tough job. We all work, except for you, smart guy.
Semi-retired.
When I was mayor, I thought it was a good idea to have regular office hours. I did that on my own initiative. Nobody came. That's not to say nobody wanted me, because there were other ways to do that, but nobody came. One of the things, by way of constructive criticism and self-assessment, I do think we need to communicate more timely and better. We're a little bit too married to graphics, which are great. They tell a story, but they don't tell the whole story. And I think we're a little bit too prone to platitudes. And so we know how to communicate more authentically. We could do a better job at that.
Mr. Collins?
I am fully retired, and I think there should be, I'm not going to say office hours. I would like to see, I'm very active on the chats, and I think virtual office hours, I think that would be a thing. I don't see anything wrong with it. I know that a lot of businesses have, even the voicemail. Everybody is supposed to return a business call within 24 hours. It depends on the business. Clearly, the village doesn't have that policy, but we could work on that. The part about, stalking your officials, I don't know if that's going to work. That, yes, we're all available. Yes, we are at Winn-Dixie buying the groceries and all that. But I think the bigger picture is that we're gonna be a world-class city. It can't be involved in, oh, well, I'll run into him somewhere and I'll chase him down. A lot of people are just intimidated by approaching, you know, officials, or especially it was in show business with the bodyguards and that whole sort of. Anyway, the point is, I think that virtual office hours are definitely doable, and I would do that, 2 hours a day or something, no problem.
Thank you. Our next question is, the topic is the big dig and resiliency. And the question is, at the last resiliency workshop, experts stated that at $75 million, Zone 1 is 12% of the cost of the big dig. What is your understanding of the projected total price of the resiliency projects for the total price for zones 1 through 8? And what best practices should be used moving forward? Starting with Lopez Jenkins.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons we have so much maybe trepidation about this project is because, I mean, that's just the last price we've got. So I don't know how accurate that price is going to be in the long term. I said we've got several factors that are working out that I mentioned last time. We don't really know how the new Dade County ordinance is gonna come out to a point. I've been hearing feedback saying not to worry about it, that it's aspirational, that you can't take it seriously, that nobody could achieve these, you know, which is fine. I mean, maybe that is the case. I'd like to hear that from Dade County. I'd like to hear it in a substantive way from Dade County, from Durham. I think that it would be a terrible idea to proceed with a project of this magnitude for this amount of money without an absolute assurance that by the time that this project is complete, we'll be able to turn on the faucet. So I would like those kind of assurances. In addition to that, like I said, our outfall for the amount of water that we're looking to pump into the bay, and that, to be honest with you, pumping into the bay in and of itself is something that I really, you know, like I said, I'm nervous about doing just because of what could go wrong. But that being said, if that's a project we pursue, where would this outfall be? And how are we going to get that outfall? And how are we going to achieve it? How much is it going to cost to buy this property from someone? Or are we going to try to take it from somebody? So these are all questions I think have to be asked. The $75 million, 12%, what are we talking about? We're talking $1 billion. I know that's not exactly the way the math works out, because part of the undergrounding is included in there. But I said, one of the reasons that like I said, I'm taking it so seriously is because this is a generational cost that we're going to impose on the citizens of Key Biscayne. So I think it's something that we really need to keep our eyes on. I think it's something that needs to be audited. We need to be known that AECOM has our best interest at heart. And like I said, so I don't think there can be too much scrutiny of this project. It needs to handle every possible stress test we have. It's the biggest expenditure we ever had as a village, so we need to test it and make sure it's appropriate.
Ms. Stoner?
As far as the overall cost is concerned, nobody knows what the overall cost is really going to be yet, because the plans aren't finalized, and there are a lot of details that have not been decided yet. Mike brought it up the other day. I've been talking about this for a while. I'm in favor of a peer review. I don't know if anyone knows what a peer review is, but it's a peer, someone of equal expertise, but an independent third party can come in and look at a plan and see if it's doing what it's supposed to do, and see if the cost that's estimated is accurate, if there are places where costs can be saved. So I think that that's a standard practice in the construction industry, and I think that that would give all of us a level of comfort that we were going in the right direction. As far as the overall project is concerned, we don't know if we're going to have to do the overall project. And if we do, we don't know when we're going to have to do the overall project. Zone 1 is the worst, has been determined by the experts and by people living here to be the worst section that we're living with at this point. Zone 8 is going to be getting some improvements outside of this $300 million project. So Zone 8 may never have to be, at least for 20, 25 years, may never have to be addressed. So that's a portion of that 325. I don't know what the portion amount is, but that would come out and be deducted. So The real number isn't 325. We don't know what it is, but we will know what it is before we go forward because we're going to have a contract. And we're not going to sign a contract until we have finite numbers.
Mr. Bracken?
So I think I think we're doing the community a real disservice by calling this the Big Dig, okay? So we're talking about a project in Boston that was almost $32 billion, and comparing it to a project here that's a $71 million project. So I really think we should stop calling it the Big Dig, first off, okay? But just taking that away for now. I'm a big believer we need to get power underground, and I've been talking about this for quite a while, and that's basically 19 million of the 71 million. So, as Nancy discussed, we've been discussing doing a possible peer review, which I'm 100% behind, but I also want to make sure that we don't let this whole project just stop, okay? We need to make sure that we actually address the flood control. We've got to get behind the flood control. We've got to understand what the flood control issues are, and as a community move forward with the right procedure, but we gotta stop calling it, playing names with this project. Look at this in a holistic viewpoint. We gotta get the power underground straight away, and we can discuss how we're gonna move forward with the flood control, but we gotta get the power underground. That's all I gotta say.
Just for context, that name was given by our local blogger and it seems to have stuck, so I think that's why it was used.
I understand. I just think we're doing a real disservice to the community with that.
Mr. Kaplan?
The only things that I think are knowable with the degree of reliability cost-wise, there's about $14 million appropriated for undergrounding now. There's several million dollars, $2 million, maybe $2.5 million appropriated now for pre-construction of Zone 1. There's about between $500,000 and $600,000, I believe, for this year's budget for maintenance. There is another $500,000 or so appropriated in this year's budget for the so-called head in the hole, the TV cameras, and there's a certain stress test functionality that was budgeted for this year. I think the crux of the discussion that's really at the forefront is less about projecting total costs in 8 phases, all of which beyond this first phase are dependent upon the efficacy of the solutions in this first phase, an information gathering exercise that will be off into the future and will be relatively theoretical until quite a long time from now. I discount to the point of zero certainty that 12% of whatever the number was that was bandied about recently represents total project costs. Everything that everybody that's associated with the planning of this project is anticipating, although it's still iterative and to be determined, is that the success in the first phase will reduce cost and needs in every other phase that follows. So there's no way to project future costs associated with the entire island. There is a way to project the Garden District, and that will happen like now. That's in the process of happening now.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Mr. Collins?
All right, I'm gonna put my electrician's hat on. We work with numbers. 75 million, 12% puts the total cost of the dig at $625 million. If you assume that there's a 20% cost factor built in there, which most contractors do, you know, it's government contract, you're gonna add 20% for change orders and cost overruns. That gets me to $750 million. Now, add the freshwater thing. Even Fernando wrote an editorial that said, once that went through in September 5th, he said it's a deal breaker. He wrote an editorial that said, we cannot afford this. We need help. This is burdensome. He was very critical of Miami-Dade County. So I'm going to put the cost just for a placeholder at 20%. That brings me up to $900 million. So that's where that number came from. The second, he's right. There will be, hopefully, we've thrown that number out enough, the 23rd, there's going to be a workshop. And they will try to back off of that number and explain why it's wrong. But in general, we've got problems with design, we've got problems with pricing, and we've got problems with priorities. Do we really want to spend that kind of money on rainwater? There is so many other things that we are really, that is a threat to our existence. The bridge, the beaches, hurricanes. The flood, this thing has nothing to do with hurricanes or floodwaters. It becomes a burden. My daughter's in Asheville. That was a flood. That lasted a couple hours. It was a 23-foot flood, and there is nothing left of their stormwater system. It's a burden. They've got to clean it out. And the other thing I heard somebody say, it's 17, we're talking 19 million is allocated for power for zone 1. Is that what I heard? So that puts, again, if we use the 12% factor, that puts the power, which I'm in favor of, at $153 million, which we were told 2018 FPL was going to do it for 49 million, something like that. So I'm very anxious to hear what goes on the 23rd.
Thank you. Mr. Freed?
As I recall, the question was, what is my understanding of the final cost? I have no understanding. I don't think Beach and Blacker Engineering owner's rep has any understanding, or the engineer who wants to build this. I do want to vote yes on a project, but I won't vote to spend any money until we know what exactly is coming before us, how firm the contract is, and that what they want to do has been tested and it's known to work. I was at a meeting last week. Mayor Rasko was speaking, and there was a talk about the infrastructure. And Mayor said, the first phase of stormwater projects is to see if it works. We can do a better job explaining it to the public, and we will continue to use the current system. So as I look at this, let's get the current system in the best possible shape we can. Let's spend the money there. Let's see how it works, and we have a good assessment of that current system and how maintenance will keep it working, and proper maintenance. We will, at some point, have to take up other stormwater projects. But at this point, again, I have no understanding, and when I've looked at the documentation on the RIAP, I see steps, and it doesn't appear that that the manager is certain of what the steps are to get this project to the end.
Thank you. Okay, our next topic is jurisdiction issues and relationships with Miami-Dade County and the City of Miami. Rickenbacker toll monies have historically subsidized the Venetian Causeway. Recently, Miami-Dade County government officials secured $110 million for Venetian Causeway exclusively. Rickenbacker, our only road in and road out, is under constant threat of overdevelopment and monetization. Do you think that the village is paying enough attention, doing enough to represent the interest of Key Biscayne stakeholders? And how could you add to this process? Let's start with Nancy Stoner.
I think the village is working on a plan for the causeway. And when I say the causeway, I mean from the toll booth to Cape Florida, all the way. It involves many jurisdictions, it involves lots of cooperation. It's not just the village's jurisdiction. I've heard of different possible solutions to the traffic. The bridge is in terrible shape, we all know, the Bear Cup Bridge, and that has to be replaced, but it has to be a holistic approach. As far as the money from the causeway is concerned, I'm not familiar with the history of that. I think the money from Rickenbacker Causeway should be coming to our causeway, whether it comes directly to the village or part of it comes to the village, and however that's going to be distributed to work on the improvements of the causeway is where the money should be directed. And I think that that will address a lot of the development that happens on the causeway. I think if the traffic on the causeway is fixed, then the development on the causeway is not really going to be our problem. If we can get home and we can get off the quay and we can get to the hospital without fear of the traffic, then what they do on the causeway, other than what it looks like, is not really going to be a problem for us. So I think we really have to work with Dade County and the City of Miami, and I think the village is doing that to get a comprehensive solution.
Thank you, Mr. Bracken.
I know that that the Village Foundation is currently engaged, I believe, it's a firm, an engineering firm that they're working with, engineering architectural firm that they're working with, to get involved with the community, that's actually working with both the village, as well as the county, as well as the city, to propose a process on how they can all work together. And I think we need to be a stakeholder at the table constantly, and we need to be as much proactive as we possibly can, but I do not understand the funding sources on how this works, I apologize.
Mr. Kaplan.
We have local jurisdiction over our 1.5 square domain. Our jurisdiction does not extend as far as our interests or our vulnerabilities. So what we have to do is what we really always do. Top of mind, every day, top priority. We engage in intergovernmental relations. We work on developing influence across the bridge by earning the trust and confidence of the county, the city, and other actors, by causing them to believe that we are credible, that we're knowledgeable, and that our interests are real and important. Even if the city of Miami's interests are athwart our own, we have to be effective in making them deal with us responsibly. So this is something that we attend to all the time, basically in all ways we can think of. Are we doing enough specifically on Rickenbacker? Yeah, I think so. I don't remember the outcome, but I do remember in 2011 or thereabouts, around the time that the Bearcut Bridge went down, which was, by the way, a very successful intervention, I think, in an emergency situation on our part. We did requested and also did backup on what I would call a forensic audit of how the toll revenues are allocated between the causeways. I don't remember the detail, and I'd have to look it up, but I do remember feeling reassured and comforted that there wasn't anything that I recall that was worrisome. We're engaged in the causeway design credibly. The county likes our ideas, they're working with them. The Bearcut Bridge reconstruction is in this PDE phase right now. We're participating in that very actively, and we will continue to do these things.
Mr. Collins.
A lot of us went through this narrative with Plan Z, if you all were here for that. And what we learned from Plan Z was the causeway is a moneymaker, but it wasn't being managed properly. They were siphoning money off. They said they weren't going to do that anymore. They took it out of parks. They put it back under public works. We were going to have a seat at the table, and everybody was going to work together. And what happened? Miami Beach lobbies Dade County gets $100 million for Venetian Causeway, and we're left here collaborating. So I think we're done collaborating. I think the only real solution long-term on this is going to be a causeway authority. And not only we have a seat at the table, but hopefully it's our table, in the sense that we are the biggest stakeholders in that. And yeah, the Miami Beach thing. Anyway, that's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Freed.
As Frank said, we don't have any control over the causeway. We don't have control over the toll gate, William Powell Bridge, anything through Virginia Key and through Crandon Park. That's unfortunate, but that's the situation. That's how it was when the bridge was first built, and we've got to live with what I think is going to have the best effect, is communication. It's our communicating through our county representative to the county commission, communicating through the best possible lobbyists we can have to work with the city of Miami. I said the city of Miami has a beautiful woman in Virginia Key, the Marine Stadium, and they don't want to take that woman to 8th Street. They want to take her to the Super Bowl. And we've got to watch for that, because if they get the money out of the Marine Stadium, it's going to incredibly, horribly impact our egress and ingress into Key Biscayne. So it's going to become traffic flow and what we can do to influence redesign of Virginia Key.
Thank you. Mr. Lopez Jenkins.
As far as the causeway, I think we have, the exposure we have at Bear Cut is something that is incredibly unique. It's the only causeway that faces the ocean. It's our only way in and out, as everybody here is aware of. So the fact that Venetian Causeway was prioritized over us is a little disappointing. I do think we have a very good situation here. I know we have, the current mayor of Dade County has a very good relationship with the village, as well as our current representative. She stays representing going forward. So yeah, I think we're doing everything possible. I think we need to keep pounding the fact that we have a very unique situation. Bear Cut is not only ours, it's people from all over the county, all over the state coming in and out, visiting Crandon, visiting Bill Baggs. So like I said, when there are major traffic issues, when people are dealing with, most of the time it's not Key Biscayneers that are dealing with it. It's people from other areas of the county that are stuck in traffic for 4 or 5 hours. So it's definitely not, we need to reframe it in a way, and I think we're doing a good job of that, of saying this is not a Key Biscayne problem, this is a Dade County problem that needs to be addressed, because as we can see with Sanibel last couple of years ago, with Asheville, with Ms. Collins mentioned, a catastrophic event would really, I mean, I hate to think of the ramifications. So I think having that as idea number one, as Frank said, is very important.
Ms. Stoner, thank you.
There's a lot of discussion about cooperation, and I fully believe in cooperation, but I do think that, as you said, and as I said in our last debate, the people using the causeway are not predominantly Key Biscayneers. They're predominantly people not from Key Biscayne, the people impacted by the bad traffic. It's the residents of Dade County who are using the parks and who are getting stuck when it's time to go off. It's an inconvenience to us, and it's upsetting to us, especially with medical situations, but it impacts many, many more people than just the Key Biscayneers. And I think we need to a little bit work harder to make the county and the city of Miami aware of that. And I also think we need to remember, at the end of the day, every single benefit we've ever gotten on this key, we've had to fight Dade County for. They've never given us anything. So we have to be prepared to fight, and I think that the council will find ways, if they have to flex their muscles and get us what we need to. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but I do believe it will get done.
Thank you. And now we're going to change the format a little bit. We're going to make things a little livelier, go a little faster so that we have time for the question and answers. So these are 1-minute answers. The questions are shorter, and we're going to allocate a minute for your answer, please. Okay, the topic is traffic. Getting in and out of and around the island at times can be challenging. What ideas do you have for improving and managing traffic congestion, traffic flow, and safety? Let's start with Frank Kaplan.
Traffic is bad. Have you noticed? Got to get people out of cars, basically. Road design is a great idea. I think some of the solutions that have been identified as needed improvements have resulted in some improvements. The turn lane coming off of Crandon to make that right-hand turn in Harbor has really helped a lot. It's a very simple idea. The problem with replicating that kind of solution is the nature and extent of the problem doesn't lend itself to easy echoing of that solution. The road conditions, were just too compact, and there's too much intense development in too small a space. The redesign, or at least rethinking that could possibly lead to redesign of some of the traffic circles on Harbor is work in process. I don't feel great confidence that there are easy solutions there. Freebie is very popular, getting people out of cars, doing the streetscape improvements so that people feel comfortable walking, maybe even to school, instead of standing in those lines to pick up and drop off.
Thank you. Mr. Collin.
I thought it was, did anybody get this today? I think related to traffic, the main thing is we got to get less of it. And so we've been talking about this forever. Some kind of signage on the weekends that gets people and tells them the park is full. So here's an Islander flashback, 1989. Somebody, one of these deals we made with the developer, was going to give us $65,000 for a sign and $19,000 to reconstruct the entrance to Bill Baggs Park. So apparently this has been a problem for a while, which we still have not resolved. So I'll mimic what you said. So better use of public transportation. We got bus routes out. We had a big meeting, I didn't, they had a big meeting last night about what we can do about public transportation and addressing the issue of people coming on the island with nowhere to go and having to go back off again. I think are two low-hanging fruits. Thank you.
Mr. Freed?
The traffic situation for most is, what is the bad traffic from Cape Florida to Crandon, up Crandon to Harbor Drive and getting through the light? Nick, Nancy, and I have spent many mornings at that intersection over the last couple of weeks, and we see the traffic from 7:15 to 8:30. And the different institutions that create the traffic, the schools, it's amazing what goes on. And the fact that physics is at play, there's just more density and more cars than the roadway allows to have smooth traffic. And the solution, you build wider streets, more road, which isn't going to work here, or you reduce the cars. And if people aren't going to get out of the cars, they're just going to have to, they're going to learn, they're going to spend more time in traffic. Who came here on a bicycle tonight, besides me? One, two of us, we relieve traffic. Okay, so we relieve some traffic here. But as Frank said, that's what's going to take alternate forms of transportation other than the automobile for 1, 2, or 3 people.
Thank you, Mr. Freed. Mr. Lopez Jenkins?
Yeah, I'm pretty much gonna echo what everybody else has said here. It's, as long as many people are driving, it's an issue we're gonna have to deal with. Everybody that leaves this island realizes that this is not a unique situation for Key Biscayne. If you get off on US 1, at basically any time of the day, you're stuck between 16th and 17th Avenue for about 40 minutes. The one issue that had come up at one point in time, and I don't know how viable it is, I'm not a traffic expert by any means, was the additional entrance to Key Colony, because that entrance does seem to back up specifically in the afternoons. So the right turn lane may have helped a little bit, but like I said, all of us who have been standing out there have realized that between certain hours in the morning, it backs up in a way that, like I said, I don't think you can make that turn lane all the way back to Calusa Park. I don't think it would make it a difference. So it's a reality we have to live in. We're a car-driven society. We love our cars, our golf carts, and that's where we're at.
Ms. Stoner?
For a long time, I have advocated having a shuttle bus that would make loops so people could hop on, especially the kids, get to school, get to soccer, and hop off, and reduce all of the parents and grandparents who are bringing their kids and having to park. That hasn't worked for whatever reason, I don't really know. The freebie has helped, but I know I haven't been able to use it because when I'm taking my grandchildren, I would have to drag a car seat for one of them, so it's just not practical. At the end of the day, we are the ones creating the problem. Just like with the flooding in the streets, a lot of the problem we're creating, and I know Helene is in back there advocating for us to change the way we live our lives. And part of it is to change our habit of transportation, walking, riding our bikes, hopefully safely, and trying to do things to make our own lives easier.
Mr. Bracken?
Myra, can we take this back to the more larger picture of the traffic?
Sure.
Let's say for the Bearcut Bridge issue.
Got a minute.
Maybe the key can get behind financially to help deal with the Bearcut Bridge issue. So we can put a bond in place. We could actually help subsidize the repair of the bridge, like we did with the school system when we built the school. Basically, right? Frank, you guys built the school. We can do something similar. We can get our horsepower, which is our money, behind the solution and basically take it to them. Out of the box a little bit.
Thank you. Our next topic is, again, the budget. What is your opinion on Key Biscayne budget surpluses, reserves, and carryovers in capital improvement projects? And let's start with, I think is Mr. Collins.
There's too many of them. It's like there's little reserves everywhere. Every project that gets started, it doesn't finish, it sits there. There's one we got planned for 3 years. There's so many reserves. It's not like a condo where you got a reserve pool for structural and a reserve pool for whatever, the roof. what I'm seeing is every project that's on the books gets funded, and then the money sits there waiting for the project to start, and it's like this sign thing that I was talking about earlier, you know, where did that $500,000 wind up? And so I can't keep track of what's getting, you know, what is the big reserve number? And if we had to, could we collapse all the, for example, if this big dig goes south, can we collapse all those? It's ultimately our money, we're backstopping it, and so if we get to the point where we can't borrow any, or we don't want to borrow anymore, can we go in and pool those reserves for something other than what they're doing? And the bottom line is, it's our money. Why is it parked at the village? I may want to use that money. I can maybe do better with it than the village. I appreciate that we keep reserves for a rainy day, but
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Freed?
The budget is the best educated guess that experts can give on where the money's gonna come from and where we're gonna spend it. And it's not an exact science. It's what one expects to happen in the future. But over time, the budget and the history of Key Biscayne is we seem to have money left over at the end of the year that are shifted somewhere else. If there is money left over and it is constant, then it is, again, policy that the council would give to the manager. We want to change this portion of the budget, and these monies that we've collected, 2023, 2022, let's use that as a revenue source, and it's a way to save money from the taxpayers for the next year. So I would just use it for us, give it back to the taxpayers, and if we need the money later, we'll adjust the budget the next year.
Mr. Lucas Jenkins?
I think, yeah, it's become systemic almost, having surpluses every year, and to a certain extent, like I said, what we're saying here is kind of obvious, this is our money. So I think it's gotten to the point that, yes, I think Mark's good idea is good. To a certain extent, you do want a rainy day fund. Obviously, like I said, we live in a very volatile environment here in Key Biscayne, but the idea that our funds should just be parked, you know, year after year at the village, and while we continue to be taxed, it doesn't seem the appropriate means to me. So I do think that surpluses should use to be funding for the next year, and that should reduce our tax burden.
Okay, our next, Nancy, please.
First of all, I'm sure everyone understands, and let's not conflate things. Reserves and surplus are different things. So surplus, I think our surplus last year was about $1 million.
6 million. 6 million.
Okay. Was it 6 million? Frank?
I don't think it was 6, I think it was in that neighborhood.
Okay. Part of what results in a surplus, as far as I understand, is we have, things are estimated, costs are estimated, and sometimes we get lucky, and things aren't as expensive as we anticipated. There'd be a surplus. Sometimes we expect to pay salaries, and someone takes maternity leave. There would be a surplus. Projects are anticipated that are either not started or not completed. There would be a surplus. I think it's, I don't think it makes any sense to return the money. The money of a surplus is ultimately used toward that for which it was intended for the next year. As far as reserves are concerned, I don't think we can have enough reserves. We need to be ready for rainy
Thank you.
days and maintenance of our assets.
Mr. Bracken?
So just to work on what Nancy said, exactly, if we're $45 million budget, we have a $5 million overrun. It's not significant in the big scheme of things. I mean, this is a very small amount of money relative to the total budget. As far as the reserves are set aside for when we have a catastrophic event that we have cash flow, so we can actually move and pay those bills. Now, we can get a line of credit, like Ed suggested at the last meeting. We can put out a line of credit and potentially not carry as many reserves. But we need those reserves in the event that we have a major hurricane here, so we can pay the people, because if we don't have cash, no one's gonna service us. And that's what that money's set aside for, primarily.
Mr. Kaplan?
Thank you for mentioning the accurate distinction between reserves and surplus. Nobody budgets ever to create surplus. there are variables in the process, and there are surpluses at the end of the year. The give it back part is actually what happened this year in effect, and happens, I can't think of an exception when it hasn't happened, because that surplus is applied to CIP, the Capital Improvements Program. So what that does is enable the projects that have been identified through strategic planning to be funded on a 1-year basis or a 6-year basis, depending on decisions and timing, sequencing of work, reducing or eliminating the need to then add to the tax burden to pay for those projects. So you can go year by year and decide not to do the projects, or you can decide to do them and then you got to fund them. Surplus does that. Last point, there are accounting standards that apply to cities. They include reserve requirements. We follow them. The auditors love us, and the bond ratings think we're great.
I know, I just want you all to understand, and you probably do, and maybe I'm speaking to the choir, but we've been to a couple other meetings, and honestly, I've been amazed that a lot of people on Key Biscayne don't really understand what our government is. And the Key Biscayne government is a council manager form of government. And what that means is your elected council sets the policy. They are truly the most important piece of the government. They set the policy, they pass laws, the local laws, and what their job is, they hire a manager, and then they tell the manager what the policy is that they have agreed upon. And it's the manager's job to carry out the elected council's policy. The manager is not supposed to make policy. He's like the CEO of a big company. But just so you understand the importance of the elected council, my school teacher inside of me couldn't sit still, so I just had to present that.
So question number 1, and let's do 30 seconds, is will you work towards a reasonable law for adults on e-scooters? Let's start with Mark Freed. Oh my gosh.
The reason I became a candidate is because of the failure of the council to act on e-bikes. In February 2023, after having been to 2 meetings where the mayor spoke and then other village officials, I came to a conclusion that the village did not know how to act on that issue. I wrote a letter and published it to the community, and I wrote the scenario that unfortunately came true. My letter was dated February 9th, 2023. On February 15th, 2023, talk to me later if you'd like to know more. I'm available.
Mr. Lopez-Jenkins.
Yeah, I think it's become very clear that that's going to be something that needs to be addressed on the state level. I think we should lead the charge on that. I do think there is a reasonable use for this for adults to use these vehicles. I know somebody personally in my life that's been very much affected of not being able to come to and from work from the Key with this, and it's been a burden. So yes, we need to address this, but we need to make sure it's adults who are insured, who have a certain amount of training, of licensing to be able to use these safely.
Ms. Stoner.
I am absolutely against the use of the micro-mobility devices until the Key gets the authority from the state to regulate. Period, end of story, because until we can regulate, we cannot protect the life and safety of our residents.
Mr. Bracken.
Even adults? Adults are some of the worst offenders.
Mr. Bracken.
I concur with Nancy. Can't add anything to it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kaplan.
Safety first. Among the problems of preemption, state preemption, proscribing our ability and authority to do what we know we need to do to protect the public, among the problems is not just the specific actions that are proscribed, but how stymied creative thinking can become when you face an obstacle that you simply can't get around. So that we can't do what we know we need to do because the state prohibits it. So until that changes, the condition that arose with these massed, cohorts of mobility devices was untenable.
Mr. Collins?
I think the question was, what would I do? I would address those issues at the state level. I would task, we have lobbyists, we task them with things. We're tasking them with the live local, that's off topic. But I think ultimately, we cannot ignore micromobility. It's coming. And I think it needs to be regulated, it needs to be segregated, age appropriate in all those decisions. But we gotta look downstream. Micromobility is gonna happen. We can't, horse and buggies are gone.
We are doing that.
Thank
We
you.
are doing that. No
Okay.
one's ignoring.
Our next question is from Luis Dela Cruz. It appears that the village may not have properly inspected its existing stormwater infrastructure to determine its functionality prior to deciding to replace the existing system with a much bigger one. If it is confirmed that this was the case, would you consider properly inspecting and performing any required maintenance and repairs to the existing system and observing it over a reasonable period of time to determine its adequacy and performance before proceeding to remove it and replace it with a new system as it has been planned? If not, why not? And let's start
With me.
with you, please.
Yes, I think that should have been the first thing we did. We have an asset in the ground that has served us. Obviously, we know how we have specific flooding problems in certain areas of the village. I think these need to be addressed. But I think before moving forward with a project of this magnitude, we need to know what we have in the ground, how functional it is. Like I said, my father worked for Durham for 25 years. And like I said, he was kind of taken aback that wasn't the first step that was actually taken in this process. So yes, I support a full and complete camera audit of our current system.
Ms. Stoner?
As far as I'm concerned, this question is like beating a dead horse. The village has already approved scoping the system, cleaning the system, making sure it's functioning, because we are going to need it to work until the new system, to the extent that we need a new system, is installed. The scientists have told us that the system that we have is not going to handle the rainfall that we are going to get.
Thank you. Mr. Bracken?
I agree, we need to scope the project, get it up to work and prove it that it's working to its best ability and see where it goes from there.
Fair enough. Mr. Kaplan?
The question presupposes that the assessment hasn't been done. Everybody that I've talked to disagrees with that. If it is determined that the assessment that has been done is inadequate or missing something, of course. Nobody proceeds blindly, of course.
Mr. Collins?
I wish I'd give my time to Lucho, but, okay. The bottom line is, all of the observational data tells us this thing our system has not been maintained adequately. And part of we were talking earlier about the new county regulations. It's actually part of the new regulations that every system, every municipality is going to have to inspect and clean, and just like the condos do now with the millennial inspections. So why haven't we been doing this? Let's look at what we've got, and more than just scoping it, let's find out what's wrong. There could be broken pipes but there's a lot could be done before we start digging up.
Thank you very much.
I answered the question we were talking about rehab. I said definitely let's make that system work as best as it can, and from there we assess what we need next. I will use the little more of my time to go back to the previous question. And at the February 15, 2023 meeting of the Village Council, when they were taking up number 12A1 on safe and secure village scooter and bike enforcement, the attorney for the village did state that council, you can ban them. And the council did not want to take that risk or whatever it was to let it go on with knowing
Thank you,
everyone
Mr.
knew
Freed.
something was going to
Thank
happen.
So, Mr. Eduardo Viola, are you here?
No.
And it was very similar to the last question, so I just wanted to let you know it was also about the system that you answered, so it was duplicative. I wanted to clear that with him. Our next question, let's do 30 seconds. This is a quick one, but it'll be interesting. Should the village attempt to buy Virginia Key from the city of Miami?
I think it can be short and snappy. Nancy?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Kaplan?
I would rather buy the city of Miami. Get Virginia Key in the park. City of Miami's not a very good government.
I actually thought about this. A lot of it's dead in corporations. That was like in the back of my mind. Can we de-incorporate that, get one person living over there, and then reincorporate it as part of the Keys?
I'd love to do it, you know, just work, everyone throw in about $1 billion and we can get this done.
I will say, in all seriousness, and like I said, it is kind of a joke, but there is that area in the backside where we've been negotiating as far as to put some fields in. The city of Miami is open to it. Commissioner Pardo does seem to be a fan of it. We've got to push to get that done. We'll pay for it. We have the additional fields, the city of Miami, and we can share those fields. And like I said, get extra fields, get some baseball fields for our kids here, which we don't basically have. So that little area of Virginia Key, yes, I want to buy that area, so get it done, so.
Okay, our next question is, this past year, the village found itself on the front pages of the Miami Herald regarding the child crimes committed by Oscar Olea. The current council and manager have made a decision to stay silent on this child sex crimes committed by the village service provider from 2012 to 2022. 3 of you will be elected to council, and Olea's trial will begin shortly. If elected, how will you deal with this issue? You will be on council when this case will be on the front page again. So let's start with Mr. Bracken.
30 seconds?
I think maybe a minute.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not really super familiar with this issue, but I would suggest that we would support prosecuting this person to the fullest extent of the law.
Mr. Kaplan?
I think the words, first of all, I am not aware of a policy to stay silent. This has been a pretty conspicuous and problematic news issue and real issue. Apart from the news, this is a very troubling event, and there's been a lot of investigation and assessment of what happened and procedures and vetting vendors in the village of all sorts. There's been a lot of public self-reflection and analysis of what happened here. As far as if the question is, should he be prosecuted, of course that's up to the state's attorney. She's already decided the answer is yes. The evidence and the facts that I'm aware of suggest that this guy's going to get convicted, and that's what should happen. But as far as our speaking to this, there is something called due process, and there is something called civic responsibility. The criminal justice system will play itself out, and we'll watch and see the result, just like everybody.
Mr. Collin?
I assume we're talking about what's our reaction going to be and how are we going to face it. And I'm going to go back to ethics a minute. We talked about it earlier in the COE. Part of that program that's at Miami-Dade is there's ethics training for all employees annually. And while the guy was never charged with anything, so he would never have shown up on a background check that we now, by the way, weren't doing before this, and now we are doing, which, a little late to the party, but the other side is, under the ethics training, what is alleged to have happened was some people kind of knew something, but they couldn't prove it, so they didn't want to ruffle any feathers. Well, with a true ethics department, there is mechanisms in place to deal with those things. And I know at my parks department, we had this for decades, and the number one priority was who got next to the kids. Those people were vetted to the max. This guy should have never been next to kids. That's the bottom line, and it was our fault on some level. So yeah, I would like to see at least something positive come out of that, and that we take a new look at how we do these sort of shady deals where we don't have sufficient evidence, shall we say.
Mr. Freed?
What Mr. Olea did and the allegations, the prosecution, the facts of what he did is in the past. We can't affect the past. You ask, what would I do as a council person regarding this matter? I can only look prospectively at what we're gonna do to protect the people in Key Biscayne from the day I'm elected and sitting up there. And again, it's policy, 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 and strategic planning to be certain that our manager executes our policy through his staff, and that we protect anyone who is going to be in the presence of an adult, and set those policies where it's not going to happen and can't happen, because policies and procedures at each department, especially the Parks and Recreation.
Mr. Lopez Jenkins?
As a father of a 4 and a 6-year-old right now, the idea of something like this happening with my kids is heartbreaking. To Mark's point, at this point, there's nothing that we can do except trying to create mechanisms to thwart this kind of behavior in the future. From what I've been told through discussions, is that we've adopted actually county standards of background checks that weren't even required to be adopted until January 1st, so we have them in place now. I think what Charles said was pretty interesting about creating a mechanism that people could be empowered to report something that, like I said, they might not want to report to the police, but just to put something on the radar, just so people are aware of. To that point, who we have around our children is the most important thing that we can do. I mean, those are lives that are permanently ruined. There's no bounce back from that. So I think that as a future council, we have to look forward at how we can prevent things like this in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Stoner?
Not only have we, as a village, adopted standards and background checks, but I believe it was a resident who brought to the council's attention a program for certifying people. So now anyone who's working with Parks and Recreation, and I'm not sure if it's more than that department, anyone who's working with children has to go through this training program. Even with all of that, something like what is alleged to have happened can happen. It's really difficult to stop something like that from happening. So part of it is see something, say something. We all know that. And another thing is we really have to make sure our children aren't alone. They just can't be alone with people that we aren't comfortable with or that we don't know. I will tell you, we did some improvements at the beach club, and a little wall was erected by the shower, and my immediate reaction was, no, that wall has to come down because whoever's in there has to be visible to everybody. And these are simple things, and they're common sense things that we can adopt.
Now, the next question is about resiliency and sustainability and taking a holistic approach. This is gray infrastructure and green infrastructure, including porous surfaces and landscaping, water management, and looking for mission success, not only project success. Part of a holistic approach includes serious ordinance enforcement and looking seriously at our current building and zoning codes. But we know from our past that this is probably will rile up some homeowners and local developers. What is your approach to this holistic approach and the balance between what is good for the community and what favors individual residents? Mr. Kaplan. I 5 minutes. No, just 1 minute, please.
I think that if I understand all of those words that might have led to a question, I think what I come up with by way of response is the idea that in some respects we've reprioritized how we want to create the environment that we live in. Examples are obviously landscaping. If you go back in your mind to the 1980s in Key Biscayne, it doesn't look like it looks today. This is a major qualitative improvement in my mind, and something that I think, something as simple and as basic and as fundamental as botany is at the top level of things that I think we should be investing in. The behavioral changes that come from having a streetscape that has a little shade make a difference. The zero waste culture principle involves something that's very difficult, but we've lived through this before with littering and with all kinds of things. If we change our behaviors, we make life better.
Mr. Collins?
Okay. I think where he was going is, what are we gonna do 30 years out? How do we make this sustainable? So we gotta step back and look at where we wanna be in 50 or 75 years. So when we go that way, we start looking at, we're gonna have to build more like the Keys. We've gotta elevate the homes. Well, how can we do that? Well, the low-lying Maple homes, they're Frankensteins. They never die. We don't have permit tracking, which would let the market, which is currently going on now, as these houses become, especially if the big one ever comes, when you hit that 50% rule, then the house has to come up to code and be elevated. So right now, most of the cities use that, the Keys use that extremely, that you can't just pull one permit, do 49% of the work, and then finish that and pull another permit and do another 49% of the work. So those are the things that I look to Monroe County to say, how can we build our current code? What can we do to our current code that does not cost money, that does not negatively impact homeowners, but helps those people in the Mackle houses get their houses raised?
Thank you.
Thank
Mr. Freed?
I wish I knew what the question was, and I really wish I had a good answer for it. But I'm not an engineer, I'm not a city planner, I'm not an environmental planner. What I hope to be is your council member who's sitting on the dais, and I'm listening to information, I'm processing information, and I'm making a decision that I think the majority of the residents would want. And those decisions will be to improve our quality of life, improve how things work on Key Biscayne, and make it just a wonderful place. We live in one of the neatest places in the world. And you know it because people from all over the world come here. And they come here because of the demand. And we're just going to continue to take these little steps. And it's easy to criticize what we haven't done. But we really need to give a lot of credit to those before us who've done a lot and allowed us to enjoy where we are today.
Mr. Lopez-Jenkins?
That was a great answer. All of that. God, see what he's got. See what it. Yeah. Well, no. And at this point, like I said, I'm not an engineer either. I think the building code should be used to encourage behavior, especially in new construction that will be more, environmentally friendly. Will be more, like I said, just the issues that we're dealing with right now are to a certain extent are because we don't have pervious. Things like I said, you drive down the street, you see these brand new, completely concrete, poured driveways, and you think there are other ways. Other ways that are aesthetically attractive too. So it's not something that it used to be. If you're going to go this way, then it's going to destroy the value of your house, or it's just going to be something that you don't even want to deal with. So I think encouraging good behavior through the building code is the way to go. And like I said, what you said was great. So I can't take anything from that.
He's voting for me.
I got 40 votes right here.
With all due respect, if anyone now has a poured concrete driveway that's new, they're going to be cited because our code doesn't allow that.
Exactly.
Our code has already made changes and continues to evolve and improve, and with a look toward the future and making our environment more sustainable, and stop doing things that are making our lives more difficult, like more impervious surfaces. And the code and the ordinance that are being considered that are new have to do with collection of rain. I know the new condominium that may go in over by Silver Sands has a component that is going to catch rainwater. There are things that can be done, and the village is going to be and does already encourage and seek new ways to achieve a more environmentally protective environment for all of us.
Mr. Bracken?
Yeah, since we're talking about building code, I would try to encourage the FPL to allow us to get a much better deal on putting solar panels on our houses so that we can get a more substantially working grid. So I would like to see the village somehow push back at FPL so that we can get the solar panels on our houses and get a more tentative, a more agreement where it's effective so that you can actually put these on, so that's on a 15-year payback. Thanks.
This is a related question. I'm going to combine two questions, and you're on a roll. So one of them is, how can we ensure that our policies our recycling and composting policies, address both the environmental impact and engage residents effectively. And then someone else asked, what about banning plastic bags and bringing your own to Winn-Dixie? So, Mr. Collins.
Fair enough.
I'm old enough to remember when we went to plastic to save the trees, and now we're going back the other way, so
Okay.
that's it.
Mr. Freed?
Composting is a wonderful thing. I use it frequently around my lawn. I've had a compost pile in my backyard for probably 10 years now. So all of our greens go to the backyard. As far as plastic bags, the state has certain preemptions, and I believe plastic is one of those that DeSantis said you can't be clean in that situation. So it's easy to get a bag, take it to the store, have it filled up, and take it home and continue to use the bag. It's much easier to carry and more convenient than plastic.
Mr. Lopez Jenkins?
Yeah, I think this behavior is more based on personal responsibility and education as opposed to using the force of government to ban things. I'm not into banning things. Like I said, even the e-bike thing, if we had the ability to regulate, I wouldn't want it to be banned for adults. So yeah, so I think this is personal responsibility. It's education. It's something, and when new and things should be encouraged when new resolutions and new solutions to problems come up. So.
Ms. Stoner?
Changing our habits is just the hardest challenge. And the village, if I'm elected, I will make it a priority to incorporate, she's gone now, I think, Helene's, some of Helene's projects into more into the village to make them more accessible to all of us. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember.
Mr. Bracken?
I want my 15 seconds.
Oh, I
back.
thought you were okay.
Yeah, no, I want my
Plastic-
15 seconds
plastic
back, I
bags?
remember.
Plastic
No, it wasn't.
Mr. Bracken?
I think part of the RFP responsibilities of the garbage collection services is to have the municipality, the garbage company, educate the community, and I would encourage that process to occur because no one really knows what recyclable materials are supposed to be going into the bin, whether it's 1, 2, 3s, or 4s. And Elena's done a really good job to try to educate the community, but she's only doing this, she's got a small amount of people, she's doing this on the chat. We need to get the garbage company that's servicing us to educate our community far better.
Mr. Kaplan?
So as not to be repetitive, I'll try to touch on something that hasn't been mentioned. The preemption is really stupid. I mean, of all things that the state of Florida should get out of our way on, the thing that keeps the county people all over the state up at night is trash. There's just too much trash. And we can't really take policy steps at a big level to reduce waste. So we do what we can locally. And that involves behavior change and education. I think the village could do a better job supplementing the solid waste people on educating about recyclable, because in other states, people are very smart about this, and we're not. Lastly, notwithstanding preemption, we went to the vendors, we went to the restaurants, we asked for their voluntary participation in reducing these non-recyclable materials, and they respond. They're actually very helpful. There's limits. Winn-Dixie put the plastic bag return place. That's good. Use it.
Our next question
Can I get my last 15 seconds back?
for the same exact
Yeah,
question.
because I forgot and now I've remembered and I didn't use it one time.
Give it back to her.
Okay, Ms. Stoner.
I have a huge objection and problem with the recycling company that we're using. Because what we are recycling is not getting recycled at the end of the day, and we're paying a lot of money for it. And the contract is coming up for renewal. So it's more than just educating us. We have to make sure that what we are putting in is going to be recycled.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
glass
Stoner.
is not one of them.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question. Our community recently was unsettled by allegations of sexual abuse of a minor. I think this one's different. The other one's here. So, our community recently was unsettled by allegations of sexual abuse of a minor by an individual who had a permit to operate in our parks. The individual, let me just read it, and then the individual who was granted, the individual who was granted to the alleged abuser, who granted, I guess, the license to the alleged abuser, the permit, has to face accountability. How would you handle this situation? Okay. Okay, so our next question is, do you think it's a conflict of interest to have a council member who was an employee of a company that was contracted to do a job?
How do they phrase it?
Do you think it is a conflict of interest for the, I guess, employee, for the council member
Yeah.
and for the village? I'm guessing.
Fernando.
Is that one council member was an employee of a company that is contracted to do the job. And that is going to be, I think it's Mark?
In that case, I think the council member should recuse himself when they're discussing the issue.
Okay. Mr. Lopez-Jenkins.
I'll say that this wasn't a secret when Fernando ran. This was well known. Like I said, the village voted to elect him. So if there is something that's a clear conflict as far as directly the ACOM, like I said, I think he probably should recuse himself and probably would. So.
Ms. Stoner?
I think in this situation, a person who has worked for a company, even if they're not currently working for the company, should recuse on any questions involving the former company, not because there is a conflict, because they need to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. So we can all have confidence in the decision that's made. I think that's good.
Mr. Bracken.
I agree. I mean, I'm just perfectly frank. If I get elected, and I hope you vote for me, I'm going to have to be very careful with the Silver Sands project because David Martinez is a customer of mine. So I'm going to have to be able to probably recuse myself. And I think that's the responsibility of anybody sitting up on here, the dais. And I'm just putting it right out there now so that people are aware. So, thanks.
Mr. Kaplan.
The ethical question is a bit more complex. It really depends on circumstances and facts that are not susceptible of a binary answer, yes or no, in the absence of those circumstances or facts. However, the appearance of impropriety is such a big driver. If there was a question, even a predicate for a question, it would be better to not participate in decisions that give rise to a suspicion of impropriety.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
Short answer, he should recuse himself. Back to ethics. Legally, he's not required to. As he said, everybody knew who this guy was when he showed up and we voted him into office. But there is a little nice ending to this. County law, ethics law says you cannot go back and lobby if you're an elected official, you cannot go back and lobby that body for 2 years. So we're in a hypothetical that certain company wins the contract and he can't come back and help us with it because he's not allowed to lobby the old city. So we'll see how this plays out.
Two more questions left. Are you guys up for them?
I want more.
Okay.
I think the clock is broken in here.
I know it. Do you have any proposals to reduce taxes and insurance costs? Do we pass on that one? Okay.
If I did, I'd be a billionaire.
How about,
I would like an answer to that. I think there is especially for me as a homeowner, a condo owner, when these bonds and the state funding go through, these are local taxes, and that we could make adjustments. We could say a needs-based seniors in condos or something could be exempt from those bonds and those repayments to local issues, which essentially does lower your taxes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Insurance is very tough. two ideas that I think we've been talking about. One is to not require property and casualty insurance to include contents coverage, because the theory is if you flood out and you lose a dining room table, and you can absorb that risk and get a new dining room table, why pay a surcharge on the insurance premium for that risk? Another is to stop the reinsurance requirement that's keyed to a 1,000-year storm event, basically, and instead float municipal bonds or state bonds at the option of the states to cover that risk instead of reinsurance.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Okay, this is a two-part question, and it's going to be the last one. Do you have any proposed projects or for teenagers and then for young children? And let me see who at this point is starting.
My turn.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say that thankfully I don't have any projects, but that's because I work with the Youth Council and the reignition of the Youth Council. They are bringing some fantastic ideas to the fore. So I think it's the opportunity, and the council has done a good job of funding them. They put together a fantastic DJ competition just a couple of months ago, and I think they have, how many, 2 or 3 events coming up in the next week? A safe helmet event. We're going to be participating in the haunted hike, and also in the farmers market. So yes, I think my idea for the youth is for them to come up with their own ideas and us to get behind them, because that's how they get engaged. Because I've had some parents come up to me.
Thank you. Ms. Stoner.
Was this just about youth, this question?
It's about teens and younger kids, so yes.
Okay, I 100% agree. Let them come up with the ideas, which is what they've been doing, sometimes with help of a parent. And the village and the foundation has been supporting all of their efforts, and fantastic things have been happening. We have some pretty talented and creative youth in our village.
Mr. Bracken.
Anything we can do to reduce screen time for the children would be a plus. So if we get them away from the phone and get them on their feet, get outside, that would be what I would support 100%.
Mr. Kaplan.
When I was president of the Youth Council a while back, it's helpful to help kids and teenagers and the like develop ideas by catalyzing thoughts. So you have a conversation, you encourage brainstorming, and then let them run with it. One of the things that came out of that exercise was an interest in the Historical Society. Who would have thought? Kids interested in all this old stuff. So that is just one example of what's possible if you engage with the schools and you get active in sports and you have that healthy lifestyle influence with kids and just help them along the way, they'll run with it.
Mr. Collins.
Well, it's been a long, programming is the core of the Parks Department, so I think there's a lot going on there. It's been a long time since I was a teenager out here, and there was no programming, and look how that ended up. But I'm in the senior programming, and the Ass Club is great, so.
Mr. Freed.
I have no projects to propose to the youth. However, over the last 3 years, I have created a project in Liberty City Protecting Youth Partnership. I was asked to be a founding director, and in that partnership of 8 not-for-profits, I developed the mentorship program. I'm completing a 1-year mentorship with a youth who lives in Liberty City, young black kid, Jakari, wonderful young man, and so I will be finishing my year this month of mentorship, and the program is continuing at this time.
Thank you very much. This concludes our portion of our Q&A. I read all the questions that I was able to read, and I did try to eliminate some of the duplicative ones. I want to thank all 6 council member candidates. We have a wonderful group of candidates. Thank you for wanting to serve. Thank you for stepping up to do your civic service. It does take a village, and we do all need to engage, and having served for 8 years, I thank you for wanting to do your part. Good luck to you. Thank you everyone who's here and was present and wants to get to know the candidates. Please vote, please continue your engagement, and we look forward to seeing you around the village. Thank you.